Hello and welcome to 209 Prep Sports Media. We will utilize this podcast and various social media sites to share information, highlight weekly matchups, promote the talent of the 209, and most of all, create a platform for our athletes. In an era dominated by social media and internet, we've also lost print media and the writers who love writing about prep sports. Some of them have their own social media accounts where they freelance and cover sports. Some are writing for a few newspapers still covering prep sports. And we hope to have some of these writers on as weekly guests to share their insights, thoughts, and ideals about the various hot topics of the week. Hello and welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. In the studio with Scott Bryant again today, joined by guest Tom McLain. I'll let Scott do the intro with Tom. So we're just going to kind of revisit, where we're at with COVID, where the CIF's landing with some of the things that are going on currently. And there's a couple of grassroots efforts to get prep sports in front of the powers that be. So without further ado, we have Tom McLain on the phone calling in, and so we don't want to keep him held up too long. Scott, why don't you go ahead and introduce Tom?
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about today's guest. Tom's he's been a really close friend for a very long time. Tom and we crossed paths years ago as playing football together, and Tom has a pretty good football background. He played, and Tom, I'll let you correct me when we get there, but he came from the football powerhouse in Los Angeles, Granada Hills High School, that turned out players like John Elway and Jack Elway was the coach there, and so really extensive football background. He's kind of like a historian when it comes to professional football. He is the one Lions fan that I know.
So is my son.
Oh, there you go. See, hey, there's two Lions fans, Tom.
Really?
But the reason why we asked Tom to be on today's show is that we've tried to take some different perspectives. We've gotten the perspective of not only the current situation that we're in, but even if we weren't in the situation, kind of the perspective of a coach. We've gotten the perspective of athletes, and so what I'm excited about is Tom's been an official for several different sports and has some really good stories to share with us. And Tom, from there, maybe just kind of give us a quick. Well, before I even go any further on that, I will say this: that Tom is like Chris and I, where he's the father of two college athletes. Had his daughter played college volleyball, and his son played college baseball. So pretty good spectrum of athletic talent in his family. Even though he's like me, he would probably say something like me, like he didn't get it from you, got it from mom, which might be likely, but yeah. So Tom, I'm just gonna kind of maybe fill in the blanks a little bit about kind of your officiating background, and we're gonna kind of freewheel it in terms of what we want to talk about, but we definitely want to get the perspective of what it's like to be behind the plate or across the net or on the football field, and some of the we'll talk about some of the stories you have to share.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to back you up a little bit. You talked about Jack Elway being the head coach at Granada Hills during John's time. It was actually Jack Newmeyer. Jack Elway was coaching down the street at Cal State Northridge. So that's
there you go.
Small little thing, but no big deal.
Yeah, well, he was right there.
Yeah, I came into Granada a year ahead of John. John graduated my junior year, which is my 11th grade year. So it was a great program. They had 3 guys on that team that made it to the NFL. 2 got rings, more than 1 ring, and it was a good experience. So I've been involved with officiating now for about 7 years. It all started with football, which I can no longer do because of arthritis. I was an umpire mostly, and got to tell you, there was a lot of people that, especially at the youth level, there was a lot of coaches on the sidelines that wore matching shirts. And I'm borrowing this from my mentor, Dave Shedlock, who we had a lot of coaches that knew nothing about the game because they had matching shirts. They thought they were Vince Lombardi. It got very frustrating to a 3-man staff out there. And that's typically what you ran with, either a 2 or a 3-man staff, along with the parents that were up there drinking in their red cups. And many a times we had to throw flags for behavior that was unsportsmanlike due to the parents' behavior.
Yeah, I know you indicated to me that's been that's probably the biggest challenge as an official, is some of the what I think you called it helicopter parenting. Maybe kind of tell us what helicopter parenting is.
Absolutely, be happy to. Actually, I'm ashamed of them. What they do is when I umpire, and I umpire quite a bit of softball, and I umpire girls softball, obviously, and I umpire anywhere from 8 years old up through high school. And at the younger ages, these moms and dads live vicariously through their children and think that they're the next Jenny Finch, or and I'm behind the plate and I'm calling a one-man game or one-woman game, and you'll hear them say something to their daughter like, "Get closer to the plate, swing the bat, keep her head in," all those kinds of things that we all know. But you should never coach an athlete during the game. You should encourage an athlete during the game and not coach. And often, more than 3 times a game, a kid would either just quietly, where I could hear say, "Just shut up. Just shut up." Or turn around and say, "Dad, I'm trying." And it still wouldn't have an effect. So what I learned to do, if any parents got behind the back stuff, I didn't mind them filming me or whatever. I'd make a joke about, "Oh, you're going to find my bad side," or "Don't get that side of my body," or, I don't want to hear anything about that call. But they would typically want to make a comment, and I would just simply say, "If you're going to talk, you have to leave." And it took control of the game right away. And usually I went to managers and said, "Your parents need to stay under control. If not, you're going to go, and they're going to go."
Oh, absolutely. So let me ask you this. So, obviously we've all been there. We've all seen it where, the parents always know more than the coaches, like you said. But as the age, do you see a difference from, as the kids get older? Are you seeing any kind of behavioral differences from the parents that, these, quote unquote, helicopter parents, the way that they approach things, let's say from a standpoint of, when they're, like you said, 8U, 10U, you've got a lot of that going on, but do you see any changes as the kids get older?
Well, the kids are playing the game because most of them want to play it.
Yeah.
There are some that are forced to play, again, to live vicariously through mom and dad and think that they're going to be getting that D1 scholarship. And I'll have my pregame talks and say, "Nobody's getting a scholarship out here. I don't see Stanford. I don't see USC out here. Let's just play the game and let's play hard. Let's have fun.
Yeah.
And if there's any questions, Coach, I only want to hear from you. I don't want to hear from anybody else. But let's keep it fun for the girls today." And that's pretty much how I'll lead every pregame talk, anywhere from a championship game to a game that means nothing.
Sure. And do you see, to take the, the comparison question from the age and then now applying it to the two, basically, if you were to break it down, the two groups, so you've got the club softball it doesn't even need to be softball, but the club sport and the high school sport. Do you see differences there in terms of the behavior of the parents?
Oh, more so with the club. I mean, everybody, they're out there, they're either Willie Mays, they're Barry Sanders, they're Jenny Finch. I mean, everybody thinks that their kid is the best. Sure. And they should get every benefit of the doubt. And they'll make that clear. On the grid, you really can't do too much. You have to kind of absorb it unless it gets to be F-bombs and that kind of stuff. And myself, I don't tolerate that. I will throw a flag for any type of profanity. I'm not going to have it on the youth game. Some people tolerate it and allow it to go. I won't have it. I just can't have it. They're kids. It's not going to happen on my diamond or my court.
Yeah, and I will say that I know firsthand what you're talking about because I too was an umpire in football, and I saw a tremendous difference in the behavior from Pop Warner to high school. And quite frankly, I did Pop Warner for 1 year, and I swore I would never do it again. I will never set foot on a Pop Warner football field again. And it really comes back to what you initially said, where you've got a group of guys on the sideline that are wearing matching shirts, and they all think that they're, Vince Lombardi. And it is amazing when you listen to some of these coaches and how they treat the kids. It's amazing how many of these guys have no idea what they're talking about, and it just cracks me up.
Do you notice, Tom? Do you notice a difference from sport to sport? Is softball the worst, or is not necessarily? I guess that it's probably not quantifiable, but in your experience, have you noticed it being worse at one particular sport than another?
Well, I get more interaction being the main guy in softball with the managers than I do as an official in football or volleyball. So that means I get to take control from the meeting, and I'm letting them know right then and there that any type of behavior that's going to interrupt this game is not going to be tolerated, and it's going to be a quick exit. And right then and there, that typically will set up that one warning, and that one warning they know after that it's over for them. And that means if they're out that game, they're out the next game too. So I usually get good behavior in a softball game. Volleyball, they're pretty much under control. The coaches are a little bit wild, but the fans themselves, they're pretty good. So I don't have really any problem with volleyball and football, depending on the hour. And what I mean by that, if you have a morning game, they're not drinking it. You have an afternoon game, they're starting to drink, and then the evening, they're shit-faced.
Yeah, and that's the truth. And my daughter played travel softball. I mean, she's at Oregon now. But, I've ran the gamut on this, and I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly. And the thing that's always been shocking to me is walking through the parking lot and seeing coaching staffs, at noon, 1 o'clock out there drinking beer, and with afternoon games still to come. And it's almost like everybody's turned it into like a social gathering or a party or whatever. And I just I just could never see how that's okay, or how it's acceptable. And so, I don't know about as much as football, but, softball, I've seen it, quite a bit.
The league games are pretty good. It's the away games, the tournament games, the state games where it's hotter than hell. So they're in the parking lot drinking, and they think that everything is fine, and all of a sudden, bam, they're on the edge, and any one play can turn into a riot.
Yeah,
if you allow it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me ask you this: if you're comfortable doing it, do you have any specific stories that you've dealt with instances like this that you'd be willing to share?
Oh, first I want to back up a little bit. I coached baseball, I coached softball, I coached football, and those are the sports I stayed with. My daughter played volleyball in college as an exercise. I didn't know anything about it, and I think that's why she chose it after playing softball. And when she got to the high school level, she chose volleyball over softball, and we were shocked. And she ended up being an all-time MMA grade as an outside hitter.
Yeah.
Our son, he played football, basketball, and baseball. Ended up being one heck of a pitcher. Too bad his arm had some issues, Tommy John and that kind of stuff, and it ended his career like a lot do. But we were glad that he chose baseball over football because his build wasn't really that big. And me playing football for all those years, I suffered these pains every morning, every day, every second I walked around. So we were happy with that decision. As a coach, I incorporated something very early on from Pinto, which is 8 and 9 years old, up to Bronco, which is 11, 12 years old. And I had an expectation sheet with the parents before the first ball got rolled onto the field. And it explained to the parents what the coaches wanted out of the parents, not to coach the kids during the game, to allow us to be the coach, because they're always going to listen to mom and dad's voice over anybody else's voice. And we had a pretty successful team by that. And if they had any issues with playing time, which never they did, or with position play, which, sometimes that happens. You overlook something in the heat of the battle. They could not bring it up to me until 48 hours after the fact because I needed to calm down.
Perfect, yeah.
And often, nobody ever contacted me. They had a little bit of a shrug after the game, like, ugh. But then they sat down, they thought about it, and they understood. And we'd have how are you today? You want to talk? And I said, no, I'm good. So I highly recommend an expectation sheet. It really, really sets the table for what you need to do for the season, how to keep your team amicable and cogent as to what they want out of the coaches.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And I can tell you that as a parent, we've been involved, with youth sports and up through high school and all that. And we, on my older daughter, we actually did experience that where we would have a behavioral contract for the parents. And I can tell you that was definitely necessary. And it's always the parents that have an issue with signing something like that are the ones that is the reason why we had to sign that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, but I like you am a big believer in that, and holding parents accountable, because it's the behaviors that go on in a for us, let's say it was ice hockey, if you've got out of control parents in the stands, that carries over negatively on the ice, whether it causes the athlete to do something stupid or it just is embarrassing to the athlete and they don't want to be there.
And that's the biggest thing is you turn your kids off and get back to helicopter parenting. Then your kids aren't going to want to play. They're going to make excuses not to come to games. I have a really, really good close family friend that unfortunately during baseball and football as coach, I had a travel team. And they asked me to be a manager of an all-star team at the Mustang level. And I'm kind of a football coach when it comes to discipline. And these kids were, whenever they dogged it before warm-ups or during, I'd call them in. Boys, do we want to play today? Girls, do we want to play today? And I said, we're not going to play like this. And I'd send them back out and their attitude had better change. Well, this one time I made kids run bat laps, which is where you run with the bats over your head. You're running around the circle of the field because they just didn't give a damn. And I'm not having that. And then I had parents going against me to the manager saying, Tom, it's too hard. But I have been coaching their kids since they were 6 years old in multiple sports. And all of a sudden they wanted to turn on me. So that's when I exited that arena, decided just to be a parent and allow my son and daughter to have coaches that have solid experience. And, coaches are going to have their style, but they know that style, but they need to allow that style to happen. One other thing I'd like to add is being a president of a baseball league. And what's going on in our times today is I think trophies should only go to winners. There's too much expectations of getting stuff or doing nothing. And I wish I could back up time and just give trophies to winners.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think for, from my standpoint, and I'm sure, Chris agrees with that. I think we too often we look at participation as an accomplishment. Participation is important, but it's not necessarily an accomplishment. We cloud the two because, like you said, everybody's a winner. And while that's not everybody's a loser, I don't know that you can justify it by saying everybody's a winner. And to me, I've always kind of had the same mentality that you've had on this is like, when you accomplish something, you should be recognized. But, if you don't, then, if we're going to award everybody for everything, then those people, it dampens the accomplishments and they no longer want to work hard for those.
Exactly right. And carries on all throughout your life, too. I mean, look at you and I, and I'm sure you too, Chris, that when you were a kid, you had to win first place to get that gold trophy at the banquet.
Yep.
At the award ceremony. And I remember getting second place and we got a piece of rice paper with a second place ribbon. What the hell is this? Guess we better try hard.
Yeah. I mean, down to T-ball, when we were, I'm 50 years old, so down to T-ball, score was kept, so we'd go to school in kindergarten or first grade or whatever it was, and everybody knew who won the day before. And, and there's a lot to be said, and it's not just, I don't even think keeping score is the most important part of it. It's learning to deal with defeat and, learning to overcome the emotions of losing. And, if you can't do that at 5 years old and now we're going to ask somebody who's 20, to do it, we're setting people up for failure. I mean, we've changed as a society, and I understand both sides. I don't agree with both sides. I do understand what the intent was. But at the end of the day, we have to learn. I mean, if you're going to be in a communist, society or a socialist government, then it may not be as important. But in the world we live in the United States, it's competitive, and it's expected to be competitive. And that's, how our economy is driven and everything else. And you got a kid that's, 23, 24 years old, and they don't even know how to cope. They don't have the coping skills to deal with loss or failure. So I get it. I totally understand. My question, and you've probably seen quite a bit, in the last, handful of years as far as coaching and in officiating. Do you have any standouts that you watched them at a particular level and said, "Oh, that kid's going to be special someday"?
Oh, definitely. When they were 8 years old, you could see it. I got 3 kids that are. One's playing D1 ball and 2 are playing in the minor leagues. And I got 1 kid that's playing center at the Nevada Arena. And they were part of my travel baseball team. And most of them played all three sports together, football, baseball, and basketball. And they're like family to me. And then you got the others that you encourage. And unfortunately, my style wasn't good for those parents that I said that we kind of separated, and they asked me to be off the staff, and they decided to find another team because they didn't like my discipline. But when they were on my team, the kids were getting good grades. They were working hard. They understood work ethic. I had a batting cage in my backyard with a swimming pool and fruit trees, and they'd come and hit. They'd hit in multiple stations, and then they'd swim and eat my fruit, have hot dogs, have campouts. And that's when they stayed in society, basically. And then once they got to when they got outside of my bubble, and I hate to call it a bubble, but when they got outside of my circle is when they went their own way.
Yeah.
And they had outstanding talent to be next level athletes.
You know, I want to go back on something that was said just a few minutes ago, but then I want to kind of address what you just said on that as well. But, you know, me personally, as, you know, a past athlete, or I use that term loosely, coach, parent of athletes, I honestly, wholeheartedly believe that, you know, playing sports builds character, but I think it's when you lose is when your character is not only challenged, but I think that's where you learn more about your character is in a loss. And so, you know, the whole aspect of keeping score, I think, is vital. You know, at the T-ball, when my daughters were playing T-ball, I used to get in trouble because, you know, the kids would always ask, you know, well, who won? And,
right.
Well, everybody won. And I'm like, no, you guys lost like 18-12 or, you know, or you won.
Right.
And parents would get angry with me. And I'm like, these kids need to learn how to win and lose because later in life, that's going to be life. And if we're not teaching them at an early age, I think that's an issue. And then, you know, I really, the way that you kind of depicted your style as a coach, I really like that because, you know, playing a travel sport, and Chris has been involved in travel sports for an awfully long time, and I'm sure he'll agree with me. You know, it's the practices and the competitions are important, but I really think that team chemistry and, you know, all of that is built outside of the softball field or off the football field or the hockey rink or the track or whatever you're involved in. And a lot of times that team chemistry is built in the hallway of a hotel room or, you know, at a post-game meal or, you know, those types of things. So to hear you talk about, yeah, they would come over and use your batting cages, but then they got to hang out and go swimming together and all that. That's probably where a lot of those, you know, the team was built was in the pool and not so much in the batting cage.
Oh, I would agree with you 100%. I mean, we played these tournaments, and I'd go, okay, guys, if we win this one, we're going to go to Raging Waters, which is a water park. If we win this one, we're going to go fishing and have a camp out in my backyard, and we're going to cut the fish up and fry them, which we did. I bridled with winning a tournament. And we did a lot of fun things that the parents were grateful for. And the parents would just drop them off. I mean, the parents would end up, we'd be boozing it up and having a good time. Sometimes I got too close to parents where it made tough decisions on if their kids were not good enough really to be in the starting lineup. And that's a hard part of being a coach too,
Sure.
is not getting too close to where making unbiased decisions.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, it is a fine line. I mean, you want the parents to kind of coalesce behind the coach and build support, but at the same time, if you do have to make that tough decision, that can be difficult. There's no question.
Well, we see that kids, you know, it's not always the kid that has the issue with the coach. It's the parent typically that has the issue. And I've seen it much like yourself. It's funny or ironic that you brought it up, you know, about how, you know, people you were close to, and then because of your discipline, they wanted you to coach them their kids initially because of who you are and your structure. And then they get into it and then they flip on you because their kid is the one that's the problem, or their kid is the one being disciplined. And, you know, nobody loves their kid more than their parent typically, you know, and so they see that kid through rose-colored glasses and don't see the detriment the harm that they're doing to themselves, but, you know, to the team as well. And so I've experienced it much like yourself, and I applaud you, you know, for kind of recognizing it and walking away and still staying associated with, you know, refereeing and umpiring or, you know, officiating, and because you can still stay a part of the game, you know. And so I've been in my own quandary a handful of times where I just don't know if it's worth it, you know, to put myself through the stress and and the agony of dealing with, a parent that's not, a very good, treating me the way I should be treated just for the effort that I'm putting forth.
It actually blows me away, Chris, how you're a high school coach and all the hours that you put into it. You might make, a nickel an hour, something like that, for the season. Yeah. And a parent thinks that
you're overpaid as a nickel an hour.
This and that, or their daughter should be starting this and that. And depending on how you react to it, or somebody in your shoes reacts to it, can lose their damn job over it.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane. Absolutely insane. It drives me nuts. And you can hear my voice rising, and I'm getting goosebumps. I'm pissed off when you talk about it. There's parents, I think that they are better. And all the time that you put into the game, you probably played some football and baseball at a higher level than they ever thought of playing, and they think they know more.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you get called in. I had backdoor meetings behind my back with the athletic director. I had meetings with the athletic director. I'm like, and it's like, and it's sad sometimes because we always go back to when we were kids. But when I was a kid, if I'd have come home and told my dad, hey, the coach is an asshole, or hey, the coach did this to me, he goes, oh, and what do you want me to do about it? Deal with it.
Right.
Yeah. And I can say firsthand that I know where Chris gets that, because we were all, we were fortunate enough to know Chris's father, and he was a very well-known coach in our community, and he was the type of guy that he wasn't going to tell you what you wanted to hear. He was going to tell you what you needed to hear. And, I was lucky enough that both my daughters got to play for him at some point, and I can say that they learned an awful lot from that coaching style. I mean, I think we're losing a lot of that. I mean, there were times when he was colorful, but to me, it was worth it to get the content of what he was actually saying. You use the law of intensity a lot of times with players, and it's effective for some, but then you've got, going back to what Chris said a little bit earlier and what you were touching upon, is that there's going to be parents that are offended by intensity, and that's unfortunate, because a lot of times they just got to trust in who the coach is, and if it does end up being a situation where you are maybe you do end up with a bad coach, there's lessons to be learned there too. I mean,
you're gonna have a bad boss, no doubt about it.
Yeah, exactly. So are you gonna, and that can be a character builder. How are you going to handle those situations? Is that going to make you better in life? You bet it is, because now you're, when that actually happens, when you have a career, it's not going to be the first time that's ever happened.
I cannot agree more with that. I was going to say something, but I can't remember.
Well, Tom, let me go back. I think we touched upon it a little bit, and I kind of asked you this, and again, if you don't mind, what are maybe kind of, obviously most of our listeners aren't going to be familiar. For if we didn't say it, Tom's in Southern California, so you're kind of in a, when it comes to sports, I mean, you're just surrounded by so many things. But
we're in a mecca.
Yeah, for sure. So when I'd asked you earlier, maybe we can kind of draw back to that, but maybe give us some specific examples of maybe when you things kind of got a little sideways, not because of the parents, not because of the coaches or officiating, or even maybe it was the coaches, where you had to get to the extreme level of maybe tossing somebody out, or how that went, and kind of the reason why I ask you to say that is, I'm hoping that maybe it's a cautionary tale for people that are listening.
Well, typically it starts with the coaches, because they're the ones that are closest to us that we're going to hear first. And again, you got that fourth coach in the matching shirt that is going off about he's holding, and it doesn't affect the play. And we tell the coaches before the game, if it's not going to affect the play, we're not going to call it unless it's egregious. And these parents I don't know if the coaches share any of this knowledge. I doubt it. Most coaches don't put their nose in a rule book. As officials, we spend lots and lots of hours in a rule book.
Sure.
In meetings. And we have to really know the game to do what we're doing. We're not just doing it for $40, $50 a game. We're doing it because we miss the game. We miss being around the game. We love being around the vibrancy of the kids, and not because of the asshole parents and coaches. And so many young kids won't even want to think about officiating now because they're terrified. They're absolutely terrified. When I was the president of a baseball league, we had our youth starting to get involved with umpiring the lower level games, 10, 7, 8 years old, and these parents would jump all over little Johnny or even Susie we had girls doing it as well. My daughter was one of them. And they would just climb up and down. And what is a little girl going to do or a little boy going to do to a big man that's trying to intimidate them? Not a damn thing. So often the board member would have to hang around the game and oversee what's going on. And we would just have to remind them that someday your kid might want to be the person that you're trying to intimidate. Often that would take care of it. Sometimes we'd have to run them out to the parking lot and even keep them away from the field for the season.
Well, and you've like you said, you've seen, and the kids that would volunteer for something like that are more than likely being raised right. So they were taught not to speak back to adults and things like that, and respect adults. And when adults overstep their boundaries and become assholes, and do things that they probably shouldn't be doing, it's hard for a kid that's now in some type of a professional position where they have some say to kind of exercise that their rights to, run a parent off out of a game, or, ask them at least, establish a warning that if they don't stop, then they're going to end the game or what have you. But we've seen it here too. We used to have youth coaches and high school and adult umpires, and now it's inverted. Now you have adult coaches and youth umpires at the little league level, and it's intimidation. A guy stands in the corner and just kind of screams and yells. I've had to go down to games and just tell people to shut up.
Right.
And because it's just not okay. At the end of the day, it's a freaking little league game, man. You go down, you're in the mecca of travel softball. I thought I knew what softball was until my daughter joined a team that traveled, and we played PGF and all the IDF, all those, IDT, all the biggest tournaments, and you go down there and it's Mercado and Batbuster Stith and all these guys, and you're like, and girls, every single girl throws 67 to 70, and you're like, holy shit, where did this come from?
Yeah, I want to kind of go back to the football field for a second. I told you I officiated Pop Warner for 1 year, and I'll never go back. There was a situation where we were, and I think I've shared this with Chris before, but there was a situation with the crew that I was on. We were officiating a game. It was late in the game. It was one-sided. I think the score was like 56-0, and so you're always. God. Yeah, you're always, if they're throwing the football downfield, you're always throwing a flag for holding to, try to keep some sanity in the game. And so we got towards the end. I think we had a whistle for an injury, and there was about 2.5 minutes left. And so the coach of the team, he's out there. It was one of his players of the team that was up 56-0, and he came over to us and he says, "Hey, look, on the next whistle, I want to call a timeout so that I can get my second stringers in there." It's 2.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and he's talking about putting his second stringers in at 56-0. I'm like, buddy, you should have done.
Don't they have a minimum play somehow? Does it have to be?
I'm going back quite a while, Tom. Probably at least 15 years. So that was
before the participation trophy.
Yeah. So there were two problems with that. Number one is those kids should have been playing earlier in the game. And number two, they probably don't want to go into the game at this point because it's almost embarrassing for them. And so as a group, we all agreed that we basically ignored what he had just said. So they run the next play, blow the whistle. He's on the sideline screaming, "Timeout, timeout." And we're looking at each other like, I don't hear anything. Do you hear anything?
It's a running clock.
Yeah, and we just let that thing run out. And he chewed us up one side and down the other at the end of the game. And finally, I had enough. I said, "Look, you don't know what you're doing, number one. And number two, that would have been embarrassing for these kids to be put in the game like that, the way that you had it set up. You should have put them in earlier." Boy, I tell you what, it was made me so angry. I just said, I can't do this anymore. And it really pushed me to the point where I never set foot, after that year, I never set foot on a Pop Warner game again.
Well, I all the coaching I've done in my town, as an official, I hate to be in my town when I officiate. I'd rather be in another town and where somebody might know me, recognize me, because they think I owe them something. And they think I'm going to be easy on them, which I'm the same guy if I'm in Linden or if I'm in Los Angeles or if I'm in Ventura or Oxnard. It does not matter. And I can't tolerate insanity, and I can't tolerate unsportsmanlike conduct, and I can't stupidity. I'm not going to have it.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I'm imagining that you being in a smaller area, you probably didn't have a lot of places to maybe officiate. You probably had to stay fairly local for your games, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Well, yeah, no, our landscape was pretty vast, and but at the same time, yeah, you're right. So, hey, we're gonna kind of wrap this up a little bit. And before we do, Tom, I first of all, thanks for taking the time to be with us and talk about this stuff. We definitely want to invite you back. Once the season, we're actually going to get to have some sports going and all that. We're gonna have you back on the show, but really, really enjoyed the conversation. I think you give us like I said, a different perspective. It's nice to hear from someone behind the mask and really get a take on that. So, Chris,
I think I really appreciate it as well. We've interviewed ADs and coaches and players, and I think, and right now, with not a lot of sports going on, it's hard for us to find entertaining value, and I think the best thing that will come out of today, because we will have a lot, decent amount of people listen. I would always go to these showcases or softball tournaments where college coaches show up. And the craziest thing to me always was the parents that posted up their tents and chairs and everything, pop-ups right behind the plate. Where do you think the coach is going to watch from? If he's out there recruiting your daughter, he doesn't want to stand on the left field line. He needs to be behind the plate and get the best view.
You can see this fine 20 feet up in those rusted bleachers through the rusty fence and being right on top of it, and you can smell your breath. Let the man behind the dish, behind the dugout, or closer to the volleyball court, or closer to the grid, and sit your butt in the seat and let them approach you. You don't approach them.
100% agreed.
Yeah,
that's how we did it with our children, and it worked out just fine.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great message for us to end on. But like I said, Tom, again, we're here on 209 Prep Sports. We're with Tom McLain, and just really appreciate your input from the perspective of a coach and an official. So again, thanks, Tom. Appreciate you being here, and
thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
My pleasure, guys. I had a good time.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Tom.
This segment was brought to you by Herrera Insurance and Financial Services Incorporated, the premier commercial, farm, and life insurance agency in the 209. For all of your personal and business insurance needs, you can locate us at www.hifsinc.com or by phone at 209-649-8863. HISFS is a proud sponsor of the 209 Prep Sports podcast, helping our youth fulfill their academic dreams and endeavors. This segment has been brought to you by Pinelli Passing Academy. Pinelli Passing Academy is the premier quarterback development center in the Central Valley. If you have a son or daughter that strives to play quarterback from Pop Warner to college and beyond, look no further than Pinelli Passing Academy. Greg Pinelli will elevate your quarterback and provide them with a lead instruction as well as teach them all aspects of the position. You can find them at PinelliPassingAcademy.com, Pinelli Passing Academy on Instagram and on Twitter. Welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. Again, thanks to Tom McLain for the candid interview. I think it's always good for us to have people on that are going to give us different insights, different perspectives, and different, viewpoints of where they stand on things. Mostly, as we wrap this up today, we wanted to kind of talk about where things stood. Currently, most tiers are in deep purple, not allowing much other than conditioning. I know that Sac County just went into the purple, so that kind of started to open things up a little bit for them, but they're still somewhat limited. There's only a couple of counties at all that would be in a tier that would allow them to even start practice at this point. So tomorrow there's a big movement going on, initiated by a handful of people. I know that Sarah, football coach, is one of the heads of it, and Let Us Play has joined. The Let Us Play movement's joined with them. There's 4 or 5 Northern California high schools, and I think there's quite a few Southern California high schools that tomorrow at 4 p.m. They'll be on the school grounds of Manteca High, Tracy High, I think Pittman, and then there was one Bay Area school. But they're asking, people to mask up, stay social distancing, 6 feet, stay on the sidewalks, don't go onto the school. This isn't sanctioned by the schools or anything like that. They're just trying to make their voice heard. And
yeah, for sure. And I completely agree with that. The California Coaches Association even sent out a tweet that said something similar to that. This is a chance for you to get your point across, but you got to do it the right way. Maintain the social distancing, wear the mask, do all the things that we're required to do when we're out in public like this, and set an example that shows that we're serious about wanting to be able to do this, and we are serious about following the rules that are set forth. If you want to participate in sports and you think that these I hate to call them protests because they're not really. I think rally is the right term that they're using, because I think that's what they are. Set the example at the rally. Be a good person. Do the things that are asked of you. Do not do anything stupid. In fact, if you're walking on the campus and you see something on the ground, pick it up and throw it away. Leave it better than you found it. All those things, all the stuff that's going to make you look good, so that they believe that when you're given the opportunity to participate, you're going to play by the rules that they've set forth.
Well, and our state in general, just the way things have gone down and the mandates and all those things are being put in force because they feel like people aren't responsible enough to make the decisions and and not just personal decisions based on those you surround yourself with. So you have the elderly and whoever you may come in contact with. It's not necessarily about protecting yourself, and it's not an agree or disagree type of a thing. It's one of those things that we have to show that we're responsible, and we have to show that we're going to take the initiative, to protect those around us and make sure that those around us are just as safe as they were had they not come to the event. So, a lot of things are changing. I think that I've read a ton of data from the states that were actually allowed to play. Illinois is still kind of in the process of deciding whether they're going to have a season or not as well. They had a Nebraska study. I'm sorry, a Nebraska study done where it showed that Michigan actually tested all of their students, and only 99.6 people tested negative. The Nebraska report came back and showed 0 transmittable cases during competition. So most people are, when they're actually, when they're getting the virus, they're getting it from somewhere else other than the playing field or the court or what have you. So I think that these types of rallies, like we talked about, if you do it the right way and you come with the mask and you do social distancing, stay within the groups that, if you have a household, you're in close contact with each other already. But if you show that you're going to do the right things, it's going to open eyes. It's going to show people that, hey, maybe we even missed the boat a little bit. Now, is it frustrating that we're asked to go back to a tier that we were already in when we could have competed in the fall? It is. But you cannot unwind the clock. You can't live in the past. We can't be so rigid and pissed off about what didn't happen. We have to figure out a way to move forward and figure out a way to move forward safely. Figure out a way to move forward that gives our kids the opportunity to have some semblance of normalcy back.
Right, for sure. I know we're kind of winding down here, but I do have to share kind of an anecdotal. I can't even speak, and maybe anyway. So what I was trying to say. Yeah. So I'm was a wrestling coach for a long time, and I am still a huge wrestling fan. I like watching NCAA wrestling, high school wrestling, all those formats. I have a membership to Flow Sports, so I'll go on Flow Sports and watch. My 2 main sports on there obviously are hockey and wrestling, but there's a lot of stuff to watch on there. But anyway, I was watching some wrestling the other night live on Flow Sports, and it's there's the group of guys that really have these Olympic aspirations and dreams. They're basically, what they're doing is that they're having these wrestling events, and they're not advertising them, and they're just saying it's going to be on Flow Sports on this night, but they don't tell you where it's going to be because they don't want to get shut down.
Yeah.
It's almost like a Fight Club,
Yep.
Nobody talks
Yep.
about Fight Club. But anyway, so I see the guys wrestling, and even though, it's not being sanctioned by, let's say, USA Wrestling or whatever, they're still adhering to the rules, and it kind of made me giggle the other night because I saw two Olympic caliber wrestlers battle it out in a televised match, and they're wrestling and going back and forth for the whole time, and then at the end, the ref was not allowed to raise the winner's hand. The winner had to raise his own hand, and they weren't allowed to shake hands.
Yeah.
I'm like,
It's the irony.
Yeah, it was very ironic, but to me, it kind of does align with what the message we just had is like, if those are the rules, then follow the rules, whether you agree with them or not, so that we can do this.
It's optics. I mean, it is. I mean, there's sometimes, there's some science to some of the things that are being initiated, and then there's sometimes it's just optics. They want to make it, it's kind of like these basketball players or football players or baseball players, or, they play a contact sport or whatever, and then they get into the dugout or the bench, and then they put a mask on. You just were, banging off of each other for the last, basketball or whatever, you're beating each other up a little bit, and so you have that contact, and now you're sitting with teammates that have all tested negative, and you're being asked to wear a mask. So it's optics, but, and I totally, I mean, I really don't have a problem with it. I mean, I think that, the biggest thing for us now is to find a way. I mean, we just have to work together, and we have to find a way, because we are seeing, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of what's going on with my program, specifically, but, we're having grade issues, we're having attendance issues, we're having kids that are just somewhat, not somewhat, they're just apathetic. They just don't have anything that's motivating or driving them. And it's been almost a year, you guys. I mean, it's really to the point where we have to find a solution. I mean, the vaccine's going to help, but they're not getting to people anytime soon. I mean, we can't even find enough people to distribute the damn thing now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, if we were to kind of put this into one thing of what we're talking about, I think the moral of the story is whether you agree with the rules, the masks, the distancing, whether you agree with that or not, if you want to play, follow the rules.
Yeah.
Follow the rules, whether you think they make sense or not. It does not matter. If those are the rules, follow the rules and get to play the sport that you love. And that's kind of like my final thought on it.
Yeah. And if you're choosing to, if you're going to choose to stay in the state of California, you have to follow the rules, play the game, follow the rules, do what's being asked of you. It's, even though it's other things are happening in different states, we're our own animal. I mean, we have our own GDP, we have our own, I mean, everything about California is just different. I mean, and I will tell you that there's been a lot of upstart and offshoot competitions, tournaments, types of things that are going on within the state. I mean, there was a big 7-on-7 tournament down in Fresno this weekend, 30-something teams. I mean, didn't get broke up, went off without a hitch. There's full contact games going on in LA County that LA County has the worst numbers out of everybody, but they're just finding a park and popping up a field and getting after it. And I don't know that that's the right thing to do. And I think it's going to hurt the others. I mean, I don't have a problem with kids wanting to play or needing to play or going out of state to play. I do not. That's not my issue. But I think I think everybody gets lumped in together. So when you're violating mandates and orders, and I feels like we have a tyrannical governor that just wants to prove a point sometimes. And it's a political statement, but it's not to be political. It's just that it seems like there's a different set of rules we need to play by. So as we get next week, so today is the 14th. So next Thursday will be the 21st. The next actual important date for CIF rulings is going to be January 25th. I don't anticipate the numbers being in any different situation. It's going to put us in a different tier that's going to allow things to get opened up. But at least I think we should get some information by that date. There's been a lot of rumors going around. I'm not going to share those rumors what I've heard, because I just don't think it's fair to share information that it's not verified or validated. And so, not next Thursday, but the following week, we should have a better idea of where things are standing with sports and the outlook with sports. I anticipate that they'll punt to mid-February, get us another couple of weeks outside of New Year's and the holidays and Christmas. More vaccines distributed, and hope that the numbers start to kind of be reduced. So we will keep you guys up to date. You can always catch us on Twitter at 209prep. You can get us on Facebook at 209prep sports, and you can always email us at prepsports209@yahoo.com. Again, that's prepsports209@yahoo.com. We'll share some information there. Again, we'd like to thank Tom McLain for his efforts and making himself available to us. It was important. It was important for us to have just a different viewpoint. So,
yep, for sure.
Thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon. See you next week.
Goodbye.